Well, good morning. Welcome to C3. We're glad you guys are here. That hurt a little bit. No, I'm kidding. We're glad you guys are here as we are in week 4 of our Been There series. We're talking about how whatever situation you find yourself in, whatever difficulties you may be facing, the encouraging thing I want you to remember is that Jesus has been there, and we can recognize that. We can learn from that together. I want to talk about this morning, though. I want to talk about scars. Do any of you guys have scars? Some of y'all have some little scars, big scars, something like that. Here's the thing about scars, right? Is one, they stick around, right? They're always there. And sometimes they bring up memories, right? They bring up a lot of things. I have scars myself. I actually have a few. I don't have like a cool like bar fight scar or like some cruel, horrible, horrific football injury scar. And I don't have anything cool like that, right? Or like, this one came from Nahum. You know, I don't have anything like that. No, all I got is like, I got some stupid ones. I have one here. Like really, you see these and you think about these, right? I'll never forget. I got a real little one right here. And I remember like it was yesterday, 3rd grade, I'm fighting over a ruler with my buddy. His name's Josh Childers. I remember like it was yesterday. We're pulling back and forth, and he's the genius that lets go of while I'm tugging, right? And the corner that, you never had the little metal sides of the wooden rulers you used to have, right? That thing went right into my arm, and to this day, I still have a little scar. I think about it every time I see it. I really do. It's like it happened yesterday, right? Or I have a couple on this hand. I have one right here on this finger, and one came over here. This was from my dog, Ollie. He bit my hand when I was a teenager. When I was like 11, 12, something like that. But dog, he was a Springer Spaniel, beautiful dog. He was an idiot. This dog was stupid. He bit every single one of my family members, like every one of us. He bit all of us, right? So I'm chilling by him in my mom and dad's bed, and he's laying there, and I give him a bone. I give him a milk bone, right? Like a little treat, right? Here's your little treat, good puppy, right? I give it to him, and I hand it to him, and he takes it ever so slightly, and then I go to pet his head because he's such a good boy, right? Literally, as I pet, he bites my hand, right? Tore me open, right? I got scars all over my hand where he got me. At that point, I was like, you're not a good puppy. I hate you, right? So I always think about him. Every time I see my hand and I see those scars, I think about it all the time. We have different scars on us, and they all mean something else. I have one on my forehead, actually. It's right here. When I was really, really little, now my mom had to tell me this, but I think about it every time that I look in the mirror, right? When I was really, really little, we were at a hotel, and I was in just kind of wading in the water. I was little enough, I really wasn't swimming. I was just kind of chilling in the water. I was wearing one of those. Now, this is like the 80s, right? Late 80s, and I got on one of those, like the one-piece suit with the inflatable ring inside the wetsuit. Like you guys know, if you guys ever had your kids in one of those. Anyways, I was in that, right? And I'm just chilling in the water. And they're having this huge party. There's a bunch of people there. And this little girl, she keeps getting on the diving board, jumping off, going up the stairs. Getting on the diving board, jumping off, getting on the stairs and going. She just kept going back and forth, right? And I'm just wading in the water. Well, one time she jumps off the diving board and her big toe goes right down my forehead. And she cuts me open and I'm just bleeding everywhere. And it was just a disaster, right? So she tells me that story. My mom tells me that story, but I don't remember it. But I think about it every time because I have a scar to remember that, right? Think about it. When you guys think about your scars, it brings up the past. It brings up memories. It makes you think about stuff. It makes you think of stories because we all have stories, right? Got this one from this, got this one from this, and we all have different stories. Scars tell different stories. Now, my middle son, he has a scar that we always like to talk about and joke about because when he was a lot younger, we had just were getting things ready to move into the house we live in now. And I would go every day after work and just work on something in the house. Well, one day we're there, and we got a lot of stuff. Everything's kind of discombobulated as we're trying to move things in and fix stuff and work on stuff. I had all the doors in the houses off their hinges, right? They're all just kind of leaning up on walls or laying down or something like that. Well, one day, my middle son and my youngest, they're kind of just hanging out in the house. And I was in the back room doing something, in the kitchen working on something. All of a sudden, I hear a big boom, crash, right? And my middle son screaming bloody murder, I mean, loses his mind. And if you guys know my middle son Riker, and I wasn't that worked up about it because, you know, he could have a hangnail, and you think, okay, his arm's cut off, right? So I'm thinking, he's probably fine, right? So I'm not in any rush to get there. Well, I do get there, and my youngest son Keegan had knocked the door down on top of Riker, okay? And the corner of the door had gotten him right here on the head. And it was a pretty significant gash. It got him pretty good. So, you know, I'm going, you're all right. But I'm like, I don't know if he really is all right. But he's got a good little gash there. He didn't have to get stitches or anything, but it was a good little cut. Well, when his hair grows out, you can't really see it. But if he gets a fresh cut, you can see, you can see it really good. So every time he gets a haircut, I'm always like, hey, look, there's your scar. You remember that? And I kid you not, to this day, if you ever, I'm like, hey, look, and I touch it, you know when he goes, ow. That's like 7 years ago, y'all. To this day, ow. Every time, I'm like, dude, that does not hurt. He's like, Dad, I'm telling you, it hurts. You can't touch it. And to this day, he doesn't want you to touch it because he swears it hurts. I'm like, okay, maybe. But more than likely, the reason he says ow is because it's not that it hurts right now. It's because it hurt when it happened. And he didn't want to touch it then, right? Think about it. We all have scars. Whether it's a little one and you have a funny memory about it, or it's a big one and you don't have a great memory about it. And it wasn't something that was a fun time for you. And to this day, when you think about that scar, when you think about that story, when you think about that thing that happened, it still kind of hurts. Still kind of stings. Still kind of burns. This morning, I want to talk to you guys about something that's a really touchy subject. And if I'm being completely honest with you guys, I wasn't too pumped about sharing this today. In my 7 years of being at C3, it's the first time I looked at Trent and I said, Trent, I don't want to do this. I really don't. I'd rather not. I think it needs to be said, but I'd rather not be the person to share it. As we've gone through this series and we've talked about all the things that Jesus has gone through and the things that he has come through for every single one of us, we've been able to relate to it. Well, I want to talk about a very serious subject this morning if I can. I want to talk about the subject of abuse. Jesus himself experienced this, and he went through this, and he has the scars to prove it. And even though myself, you know, I feel pretty underqualified to be talking about this because if I'm being honest with you this morning, it's not something that I have experienced personally in my own life. But I do want you to know this morning, I could sit here and give you all the stats in the world and I could give you all these numbers and you all will go, yes, no, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense to me. Yes, there's probably people in my, but I want you to know, can we all just be in agreement this morning that even though you may not have been, there are people that you know, family members that you love, friends that you care for, people in your life who you know without a shadow of a doubt or even yourself has dealt with abuse. It's a very real subject, and it's something that the church, if I'm being honest with you, doesn't really like to visit very often because it's an uncomfortable truth. It's not something that we're very used to talking about. And can I be honest with you also, here at C3, one of our things is we take God very seriously, but we don't take ourselves seriously. And I am not a very serious dude. So to sit here and talk to you guys about this, it takes me out of my comfort zone. Because what I want to do for you guys this morning is I want us all to leave and go, boy, that was a fun message. Boy, that was really good. I'm really encouraged. I'm really psyched. And I had people in the 9:30 come up to me and they're like, dude, what are you doing, man? I'm like, I know, I didn't want to talk about this. But it's an uncomfortable fact that we have to be able to deal with. You see, abuse is something that's very real and something that Jesus knows all too well. And I want to share with you, if I can, without going into too crazy details, the situation that Jesus found himself in. Now, he's arrested, he's tried, he's put in prison, and he finds himself in a situation where now it's this guy or Jesus to be released. This guy named Pontius Pilate, who was the judge, he was the one that could decide. He left it up to the people. The people said, let that dude go and make sure you get rid of Jesus. And he asked them, what do you want me to do with him? And they said, crucify him. And now we find what happens in the story here in Matthew chapter 27. Here's what it says. So Pilate, that's the guy, the judge, released Barabbas to them. He ordered Jesus flogged with a lead-tipped whip. Then he turned him over to the Roman soldiers to be crucified. Some of the governor's soldiers took Jesus into their headquarters and called out the entire regiment. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. They wove thorn branches into a crown and put it on his head, and they placed a reed stick in his right hand as a scepter. Then they knelt before him in mockery and taunted, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they spit on him, and they grabbed the stick and struck him on the head with it. When they were finally tired of mocking him, they took off the robe and put his own clothes on him again. Then they led him away to be crucified. Jesus Christ went through one of the most gruesome, horrific things that we could ever imagine. It says that Jesus was flogged and he was whipped with it said lead tipped, but you look more into what they used in Roman times and what exactly they did. What ends up happening is they actually bring him into this place called the Praetorium, and there's a big, huge stone right there. And what they would do, they would chain somebody to it. They would hold him down, they would strap him to it, and they would beat them. And they wouldn't just use a stick, they wouldn't just use a little whip. They used what was called a flagellum. Basically, this thing had a bunch of different stuff on it. Rocks, bone, glass, really nasty stuff, something you wouldn't want to take one time. They took this thing and they stripped Jesus naked. Naked. And as they put him on the stone, not only was he now stripped naked and put down on this thing, but now he's got the entire Roman regiment, estimate probably around 200 Roman soldiers, surrounded him. 200 people surrounding him, and they beat him mercilessly. And they messed him up. They did it all on one side to the point that they made sure they ripped him open really good. And then when they got done with that side, and when they got too tired, they turned him around and they did the other side. It was a nasty, nasty scene. If you ever looked at anybody else who ever went through that, history shows us that people would pass out, people would vomit, some people would die. It was a horrible, horrible scene that he had to go through. Now, in Jewish culture, if they were to be whipped or to be flogged, what they would do, they would have to stop at 39. 39 is as many lashings as you can get. The Roman soldiers did not adhere to that. They made sure to go over that. It literally said that they went to the point that they were out of breath. They couldn't do it anymore. They had to tag somebody in to come and finish the job on Jesus. Then after that happens, you find him in a place where they take this crown of thorns, they put it on his head, which has to be so painful. He's already busted open and nasty. They put this crown of thorn on him, and then they start mocking him and making fun of him. They're calling him the King of the Jews, laughing at him, calling him everything that they could think of. And then they start doing this game where they're hitting him with this reed, with this stick. And history shows that actually they would play a game. A lot of these guys would play a game called Who Hit You? And basically what that is, they would blindfold the prisoner, whoever that was, and what they would do, they would take turns drilling him as hard as they could, and they would make him guess which one of the soldiers hit you. And then they would just keep doing it again and doing it again. And then we hear again, they did it so often that they got tired of hitting and beating and mocking him. We're told actually 4 different times Jesus was stripped naked and then his clothes put back on. That was for 2 reasons. One was for simple humiliation. And the second was because they wanted to make sure he felt every single blow that he got. And then, of course, you guys know what happens in the story. Jesus then has to take the cross and he carries it all the way to a hill where he's crucified. Nails put through his hands and his feet. He's stabbed in the side, and he has a horrific death on that cross. Now, without going into any more detail and just keeping it as PG-13 as I can, this is a horrible, horrible thing that has happened to Jesus. And so the good news that we find in this and the things that we can actually see so that we can understand what we're talking about when we're talking about the issue as serious as abuse. The first thing that I need you guys to understand and I need to remember myself, whether you are in that situation, you have dealt with that situation, whatever it is you find yourself in, I want you to know, even though it has been said over and over and over again, please be reminded this morning that if you have been abused, you have dealt with abuse, know that Jesus has been there. Know this morning that the pain that you are feeling, understand that the loneliness that you may feel, understand the confusion that comes with this, understand Jesus has been there. Jesus went through a horrible, horrible situation. He has been in that situation. Now, when we're talking about abuse and we look at all the different forms, there's more than just one form, right? A lot of times when the word abuse gets brought up, what do we think of? We think of physical, right? We think of pushing, shoving, hitting, whatever. Think about all those things. But there's more, isn't there? There's different forms. There's verbal abuse, right? Someone can be verbally abused. You can be told things or hear things, and those things actually do something to you, right? Those are the things that can affect you. The old saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words may never hurt me. Boy, I wish that was true. I really do. I wish that some things that are said to people, that they would be able just to let that bounce off and it wouldn't affect how they live their life or what it is that they're doing. But you and I both know that sometimes our words that we use on people, and when we put those lies into people's heads, if you say it over and over and over again, I know of people in my own life who have started to believe those lies because they have been verbally abused for a very, very long time. You know, there's sexual abuse, and that's a very, very real thing. And those physical and sexual abuse are things that we talk about all the time, and it's a very serious thing. And the detriment of who that affects is absolutely everyone around you, and it is very, very real. But there's also spiritual abuse. Happens in religious organizations all across the world, where people are able to say, well, because God said this, I can tell you to do this. Well, God told me that, or this creator told me, and people abuse others by acting like they have some kind of authority over them. And they lord it over them. And they get people to do things that they would never want to do. And sometimes it's later on in life that they realize, I can't believe I let that influence me. It's an impact. It's real. And I want you to know this morning, as we're looking at these and as we're dealing with these, I want you to know the most important thing when we're talking about abuse is there is never, ever, ever a situation where it is okay. There is never, ever a time where there is an excuse for abuse. Jesus has been there. Jesus has seen every one of these, right? Jesus was, of course, physically abused, beaten beyond recognition. There was nothing about Jesus by the time he got to the cross that would make you think, oh, this is the same guy. It was bad, guys. It was bad. As he was taken, as they stripped him 4 different times, some could argue that that was some form of sexual abuse. He was definitely verbally abused. They called him everything in the book. They made fun of him. They laughed at him. They mocked him. They spit in his face. And then he had to deal with the spiritual abuse. People saying, oh, why don't you call down the angels and bring them down, right? You said you control angels. How about you have them come save you? Oh, you're calling out to Elijah. Yeah, call out to your prophets. That's a good idea. Yeah, go ahead and bring your religion into this. Jesus has been there. Jesus has dealt with this. The next thing you need to be able to see, and this goes without saying, but it's important for us to know this, is that Jesus wanted absolutely none of this to happen to him. You see, sometimes I think we sit around like Jesus was sitting there with a smile on his face getting ready to do this for me and for you. Listen, do we not remember the story of what happened not too long ago in the garden? He's sitting there and he's praying so much that he's stressing out and he's having a panic attack. And he calls out to his father and he says, Father, if there is any way that we can make this whole redemption thing happen, without me going through what I'm about to go through, let's do that. The whole judgment that's about to pass upon all of mankind, you're about to put on my shoulders, can we do it some other way? You see, Jesus didn't want any of this. Many of you who have dealt with abuse, you didn't ask for it. Unfortunately, what ends up happening is a lot of people who have dealt with abuse, they find themselves in a situation where they start talking themselves into, well, maybe I deserved it. Well, maybe if I would have just said this a different way, maybe he wouldn't have said that to me, or maybe he wouldn't have put his hands on me, or maybe she would have been able to. There was never an excuse for abuse. And so understand that you do not ask for it and you do not deserve it. Abuse is always a problem. Jesus didn't ask for any of this, yet he went through it anyways. I want you to know this because this is important. We talk about all these different forms of abuse, right? And some listen, they can be acted swiftly upon. They can be taken care of immediately. They can be dealt with. But sometimes there's a process with some of these things, and we're trying to figure out how we can actually get out of a situation. I want you to know something as you were dealing with it, or maybe you have dealt with it before. I want you to know that what may be missed by the law is never missed by God. I want you to know that not all abuse is necessarily unlawful, but all abuse is sinful. God condemns it. God does not care for it and wants you to change, wants to see change in your life. I want you to know that today, God, even though you and I deal with these things, he had his son go through this so that he could sympathize and be there with us. Jesus has been there. Jesus didn't want any of this. If you're sitting there saying, I didn't ask for this, why am I going through this? Jesus said the same thing, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why am I going through this? On the cross, he dealt with the same thing. And so understand this morning, all these forms of abuse and all these things that maybe you have dealt with in your own life, it's not missed by God. His heart breaks because he cares for you. So how do we react? What do we do? You see, a lot of times, here's what happens. We hear a message. Say for last week, we're talking about people talking about you, talking bad about you, right? And a lot of times we say, okay, well, I'm not going to let it affect me, right? So I'll just sit in it. I want you to hear me loud and clear. If you don't hear anything else I say today, listen to what I'm telling you. If you are in an abusive spot right now, if you find yourself in a situation, and I know it's more complicated than this, but here's step one. Get out. You need to get out of that situation. Don't let anybody tell you, well, you just need to submit. Well, you just need to let God. Get out. Don't let that thing be a thing anymore. And I know it's more complicated than that. I know that it's not as easy. I know there are steps that need to be taken. But you need to find a way that you can get yourself out of that situation. So then, okay, you get out. And you're moving on, and things are changing, right? But those scars are still there. They still hurt. They still remind you every single day of what you went through or what you're currently still going through. How did Jesus react as he was going through this abuse and as he was dealing with this pain? Look at what he said. Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. These people who have mocked, ridiculed, and beaten the living God, Jesus asked the Father to forgive them. If you have been in a place where you are trying to heal from that abuse, there must be space where you can find forgiveness in your heart. It doesn't happen overnight. And that doesn't mean that you're friends with those people or that you see them every day or that's something that you still want to be a part of. But there is forgiveness. There is redemption. And let me tell you this morning, whether you are the person who has been abused in some way, shape, or form, or you are an abuser in some way, I want you to know this morning that there is redemption. Jesus said, forgive them. Why? Because they don't know what they're doing. Most people who are abusive, do you know why they're abusive? Because at some point they were abused. They had a past. They have a scar that they're still trying to learn why. That's how they're projecting on other people. I want you to know this morning that it is easy for us to be able just to say, yeah, you know what, you need to get right and you need to not do those things again, but let's do this. Whether that's you or not, I want you to know you need to recognize where you're wrong. You need to repent. You need to change your mind. You need to walk away, and you need to ask for forgiveness. That's step one. And then what can actually end up happening is there is going to be redemption. There is actually going to be change. Because here's the best part of the story. I've been given bad news this whole time. I hate this, guys. I'm uncomfortable right now. I don't like this. I like telling jokes. I like making people smile. I like having a good time. But this is a serious subject. But here's the best news that I have for you. If you're sitting here going, this is really heavy, this is serious, I want you to know the good news. The good news is that after the resurrection, even after he came back in his glorified body, Jesus still had his scars. Jesus, as he was recognized and the people start saying, oh, that's Jesus. That's who he is. Guess what? He still had the holes in his hands. He still had the holes in his feet. He still had the hole in his side. And he used it. Thomas said, listen, I'm not going to believe unless I can actually see it. And he said, look, see it and believe it. Jesus in his glorified, he could have been without it, right? I want you to know this morning that it was a reminder of what he went through and what he dealt with. Every scar tells a story. Every scar that you have tells a story. Some of them you don't mind telling. Some of them you still are holding down and you don't want to share that story because it is something that brings up a lot of pain and a lot of hurt. And you still are trying to process through it. And I know scars don't just heal overnight. It is a process, but I want you to know that today, that as you stand here and as you sit here and as you think about the scars that you have, please think about the scars that Jesus has. Because he was beaten, he was abused, he went through those things, and he came out the other end. And one day when this whole redemption arc is over for you and for me, and we get to stand before our risen Savior, and I get to go and be with the one who died for me, guess what's going to happen? As I go to him, he's going to have his arms open wide, and guess what I'm going to see? I'm going to see his scars. Because of what he went through for me. And what he went through for you. And as we close this morning, I want the words of the prophet Isaiah as he was speaking about the coming king be the good news for you this morning. Isaiah 53 said, surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him. And by his wounds, we are healed. You want healing? You want redemption? You want forgiveness? It's found in his wounds. It's found in his scars. Would you guys bow your heads with me this morning? We're going to close. I'm not going to ask you a bunch of questions this morning, and I'm not going to ask for a movement, but here's what I am going to do this morning. I want you guys to join me in prayer. And not just sit there with your eyes closed and I pray out loud. I truly want you to join me in prayer for two things. I want you to join me in prayer for those who are possibly in this building, watching online, those people in your own life that you know who are in an abusive situation. There's all different forms and types. And there may be someone you know, or maybe yourself, who's going through that tough situation right now. will you pray first that they remember that Jesus has been there? And that you may be like me, and you may not be qualified. You may be someone who says, I don't know what that is like. But we're all clear this morning that Jesus most definitely knows what they're going through. Will you pray Jesus on their life this morning? Will you pray for healing? Will you pray for redemption? Will you pray for forgiveness and change? And maybe this morning, whether it's you, someone you know, someone watching online, maybe you recognize and see that there's been abusive times in your life. You say, well, I've never put my hands on someone. Well, have you used your words? It's time to repent and ask for forgiveness. Pray that those people would recognize and repent and ask for forgiveness. Maybe this morning, for the first time, you're hearing about this gruesome story and realizing that it's his wounds that can heal me. Maybe that's what you need this morning. You need a healing. All you have to do is call out to him. The Bible says that those who call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Do you need to call upon his name this morning? All you have to do is reach out to him. Ask him to save you, change you, take your sin away. He promised he would do it. Father, I do pray for those situations. I do pray for those people who are in the middle of a struggle, a battle right now. Maybe it's not as simple as we want to make it. Maybe it's more difficult to get out of a situation. God, I pray that you would give them a way out. I pray that you would show them that way out today. I pray that they would be able to find redemption. Pray that they would recognize that you would not want them to stay there, but that there's a change that's able to happen through you. I pray for those who have abused and those who have sinned against others and against you. I pray that we would seek that redemption by recognizing that. God, that there would be change in our lives. Father, if someone has cried out to you today, I pray that they know that you have changed them because of your love for them. Father, be with every single one of us. Let us take this as an opportunity to look at your good news and remember and recognize your scars. We love you. We thank you. We praise you. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Guys, thank you again. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of the message. Tonight at 5:30, we're going to be here hanging out. We would love for every one of you to come back, hang out with us, come and get a hot dog, come get a drink, and come and hang out. We will see you tonight at 5:30. God bless you. Thanks, bro. Appreciate it. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.